So if I look at my pretty map again, right, and we come up with this, kind of patrol strategy, which incidentally probably shouldn't mention because it's these red spots, right? We call this hot spots policing, right? That's the fun word for it. Fun fact at the people who came up with hotspots policing, this concept and this idea, they have a band at the National Academic Conference called the Hotspots. They play like old country, like not old, oldish like Americana music. I don't know. It's like that's the stuff that your grandparents listen to. Anyway, so if we think about this, right, we can see that this is an efficient strategy, right? But like all things, right, we know that there is a trade-off, right? There is a trade-off. If you think about this from a very basic standpoint, right? If let's say that I want to hang out with my girlfriend, I gain something, sure, but I'm trading off the fact that I can't listen to baseball, for like 3 hours, right? Because she doesn't like baseball like I like baseball. So, if I want to see my girl, I'm not listening to the Rangers tonight. It's okay. It's fine. I don't have TV, so I can't watch it like in the background, right? But, it's like a trade-off, right? So if you think about this from a policing standpoint, so if I think about what the trade-off is going to be, right, I know that if I want to do this, right, if I know that I have like these targeted spaces and I know where I can plot them out, right, in order to find out that stuff, right, I have to invest in the infrastructure, to make it happen. I have to advocate for it. So what does this investment look like, right? One, I gotta have like my whip ass school data processing, right? Because if I'm not collecting data, if I can't plot the geography of it, if I don't have that kind of, information back from the computers, the software, everything related to that, right? It's not going to do me any good, right? So I have to invest in this kind of technology in order to get it, right? It's a requirement. Otherwise, if you don't have the technology, you don't have the means and the capability, right? Like it's not really effective, right? Or it's going to be, you just can't do it, right? The other part too is that I got to invest in the people. If I have the people, and this is going to be stuff like I have to have the analysts, right? They got to tell me where to go, how to do it. I also got to invest in the, officers to specialize in those areas. Because if I am a police officer, right, if I'm a police department, right, I have the calls that I go to all the time, like my neighbor's music's too loud. And I also have to have neighbors, or excuse me, the officers that go to those specific areas, right? Because if I'm invested in deterring crime in those places, right, I have to let them be free in order to do that, right? But I also have to have the people available to do like that kind of thing, right? So there's also the people and there's the technology, so I can respond to the random calls while pairing with the targeted patrol. So in this particular case, then if I'm able to target in specific areas, if I can respond to it, right? Because you can't just ignore those calls, right? People get fussy, otherwise the police department not care about me, do you even think about me anymore, right? What's happening to us, right? That's the kind of thing a civilian's going to say, right? As a police department, you got to respond to that, right? You got to respond to those needs, right? So in this particular case, right, so if I have the people, I have the analysts, I have the investment, right, it all seems pretty good, right? But becomes a very costly, right? Big money. Because it's continued investment, right? And you have to upgrade and get all the latest like cool stuff. You can put computers in cars. You have to like if you want to be able to route people on the call, if you want them to have like that, call directed patrol and stuff, all this, right? It costs money, right? It costs money. Like, ain't nothing free out here, right? It's not a free idea coming in, right? So we know it's going to cost money, right? And we have to convince the city to give it to us, right? The big thing too, right? If you think about this, how this works in a city from a politician standpoint, why is this like work? Why is this, like, I'm okay giving it, right? One, people fear crime, right? They want you to do something about it, right? Please stop those, people from doing graffiti in my neighborhood, that kind of thing, right? I mean, like, and to be fair, right, if you live in a violent, high crime area, right, where you hear gunshots all the time, right, you don't really feel safe, right, you don't feel secure. You want some people to do something about it, right? So people fear crime, right, going on, right, and it looks good if I'm a politician to be like, ooh, I'm tough on crime. Look at me, you know, I support, like the military or police, right? I want to be tough on it, right? I have this record of supporting it, right? That's why it's always easy to give money to the military because people are afraid of getting hurt, and then that's when they put all the money into the military and not into other social services, right? But that's a conversation for a different time. So if we look at this, right, we have this, these kinds of areas where always feel safe. It's politically like, enviable position to be in, right? Because you can say it's tough on crime, right? There's also some trade-offs, right? If we consider, what happens, right? So there's a trade-off in the sense of like, where we target and how it affects the neighborhood or, that area, right? And the people that live in it. This context part. So in this particular case, then, right? So if we consider this area of what's present here, right? If I know this is in, this is where I'm going to focus, right? Remember a few couple things, right? That we know about crime and delinquency, right? The first thing that we're going to note, right, is that number one, right? We know crime is concentrated from social disorganization theory and other crime plotting, right? In areas of high poverty, which also comes typically with increased numbers of Black, Hispanic, Latino people, right? And because as we discussed in the last video, right, these crime spots are highly persistent, right? They're the same spots time and time and time and time and time again, right? They don't change, right? So what ends up happening, right, is that you have these officers who come in, right, and there is a persistent police presence. Like the alliteration, you're welcome. So if you have this persistent police presence, right, and I'm focused on these areas, right, and seemingly at random, right, and I know these are areas with high poverty, these are areas with, like, a lot of violence, drug crime, right, because that's usually what I'm targeting for. I'm not sending police to take care of a like someone stealing mascara from Claire's, right? Like I'm focusing on some juicy stuff, right? Focusing on the drug dealers and focusing on the like the gun crime and focusing on like robbery, stuff like that. That is what I want. That gets the people's juices and fears going, and that's what I want to prevent, right? Because there's all kinds of like, economic and social costs to having like unchecked violent crime, right? So if I'm an officer, if I'm a police department, right, I want to focus on these areas, right? But I also know that these things happen, right? What's the consequence of that? What's the trade-off? So the trade-off then, right, is that you end up having police, are allocated to these to these geographies. And the point being is, right, if you have these allocated geographies, and so if I have more activity in this area, I'm more proactive, perhaps. Maybe I decide that I want to have, more stops in the area, more searches. I'm trying to find contraband, what have you, right? If I'm proactive in these areas, right, this can lead to something where the people in those areas feel like they are over policed, right? The police are too pervasive. They're everywhere in this area, right? And so they are being called and focused in those particular target areas, right? And so it can make the neighborhood, make it seem, especially if you see police all the time, right? If you see the police, right, maybe you feel unsafe and you associate the police with feeling unsafe. Maybe you grow fearful of police, right? You're also fearful because maybe, you're more like, because it's an area where I'm sending police and I want to be more proactive, right? There's more stops, there's more seizures. And so, maybe I get fearful of police because I feel like they're going to harass me, they're going to shake me down. And so what ends up happening is for people living in those areas where police are often deployed, right? It comes at a cost where like community relations, so the relationship that we have with the people in high crime areas, right, are compromised, right? It's not uncommon for people to think like, yes, I'm grateful for the police. I'm glad that they're here taking care of us. At the same time, I'm harassed. I, feel like I can't get like any breath away. I don't like the police. I've never had a good relationship with them. They're persistent. They're always there, right? So you have this trade-off in trust because of the direct focus on the target areas, right? So this creates like a problem, right? Because if we, because we know there's all kinds of consequences to this, right? Because if you think about, if I am more likely to arrest people or search and procedure, right? I'm more likely to give someone like, I'm increasing the likelihood. It's not guaranteed. I'm increasing the likelihood that someone is going to go to jail, go to prison, or something like that because of this increased contact, right? And that forever alters someone's life trajectory, right? Having like a criminal record, for a long time, right? And it's also stressful. A lot of people who have bad experiences with police, right, have report sleep patterns, depression. They go out of their way to avoid police, right? They change, so they're changing their habits in that area, right? And so, it's interesting that the idea of police and the power of them are such that they, really create, a lot of depression and anger, right? You see a lot more cases where use of force is going to be higher because police are more present in those areas, right? You see cases where, so you have this, discriminatory behavior that's occurring because of where police are patrolled, right? While it is grounded in the sense of like, yes, we want to focus on high crime areas, right? We also know that there are negative consequences to that. But remember, right, as a police officer and when I consider my funding, right, my priority is on getting crime down, right? And if I focus on those areas just for reference, right, it's like 20 to 30%, I can get a reduction in crime by focusing on those areas by like 20, 30%, to go in that there. So my priority is getting crime down and getting that reduction and that prevention, right? And at the end of the day, right, this is what we judge police on, right? Are they able to make this happen, right? This is the ultimate goal. But we ultimately don't judge. I mean, even though we may discuss like issues of discrimination or use of force, right? This is not like a formal evaluation point, right? Because when we talk about city budget allocations and we talk about if they're effective or not, right? We might point out instances of discrimination and bias exhibited by police, use of force patterns, and disparities in police treatment, right? This is all at the end of the day, though, they focus on this, right? We judge police on their effectiveness in getting crime down. And if we feel unsafe, if we feel, secure, insecure, and we want the police to do something, we want them to address this first because that makes us feel better, right? And that's kind of like an interesting, consequence of this, right? Is that because this is the ultimate goal, we don't change those goals, right? This is ultimately what we focus on. There might be negative trade-offs, right? Because look at the trade-offs that come into place, right? This isn't necessarily cost effective, right? We have to build all this stuff, we have to spend all this money, we have to get the people, we have to focus on this, right? Like, oh, it turns out we've like pissed off communities against us because we're there all the time, and there might be some like discrimination happening. That's a huge trade-off that you're making in order for crime, right? But it's also a consequence of our patrol, of our patrol patterns and choosing. It is effective to an extent, right? Because I'm able to get this investment leads to a 20, 30% reduction in crime, but it does come at the cost of this, right? So the point of this, right, is to say, really, like, if you consider everything else that's happening, right, does this patrol strategy, this hotspots policing, seem worth it?